Mortal Kombat has over a dozen ninjas, and every single one of them has a story that goes way deeper than palette swaps and special moves. From tragic origin stories built on lies, to characters that literally started as coding errors, to assassins created from pure blood magic. Today, I'm breaking down and ranking every ninja in the franchise, starting with the one everyone already knows, Scorpion. There is zero debate about who goes first. Scorpion isn't just a Mortal Kombat character. He is Mortal Kombat. Hanzo Hasashi debuted in the original 1992 game as the first playable character, and he's been the face of the franchise ever since. He was actually left out of Mortal Kombat 3, and the backlash was so intense that he was added back in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. That's how much this character means to the fanbase. And you already know the move. Get over here. That spear has survived over 30 years and 7 costume redesigns, and the yellow and black color scheme has never changed. It's arguably the most iconic single attack in fighting game history. But here's the thing nobody tells you when you first pick up the controller. Scorpion's entire vendetta, the rivalry with Sub-Zero that defined the franchise for decades, was built on a lie. Quan Chi murdered Hanzo's family and his entire Shirai Ryu clan, then pinned it on Sub-Zero. Scorpion spent multiple game cycles hunting the wrong man. And the kicker? The hellfire powers that make Scorpion so dangerous weren't even his to begin with. Quan Chi gave them to him during Resurrection. The man who destroyed his life also made him powerful enough to keep chasing a ghost. Some fans argue Scorpion has hogged too much story time at the expense of other ninjas. And honestly, they're not wrong. But nobody becomes the face of a billion-dollar franchise by accident. And speaking of that rivalry, the other half of it has a story just as twisted: Sub-Zero. Here's something most people get wrong about Sub-Zero. They think he's one character. He's not. There have been two completely different men under that mask, and the swap happened so quietly that millions of players never even noticed. The original Sub-Zero was Bai Han. He debuted in 1992 alongside Scorpion, and he was cold, ruthless, and willing to kill without hesitation. But Bi-Han didn't last long. Scorpion murdered him during the events of the first Mortal Kombat tournament, and just like that, the franchise's most iconic ice ninja was dead before the sequel even launched. So who's been wearing the mask since MK2? His younger brother, Kuai Liang. He picked up the name, the powers, and the legacy without anyone in the audience batting an eye. One of the most understated identity swaps in gaming history, and it happened in 1993. And here's where it gets tragic. The entire Scorpion versus Sub-Zero rivalry, the blood feud that defines this franchise, was built on Bi-Han's actions. Kuai Liang had nothing to do with it. He inherited a war he didn't start, a grudge he didn't earn, and a name soaked in someone else's sins. He's been paying for his dead brother's choices across 34+ titles on every platform imaginable, making him statistically one of the most represented fighting game characters ever. The ice powers aren't learned either. They're genetic, a cryomancer bloodline passed between brothers, which makes the whole thing feel almost mythological. One brother falls, the next picks up the mantle, and Bi-Han, he didn't stay dead. He came back as Noob Saibot, a corrupted shadow wraith, which only fuels the fan debate about who the real Sub-Zero actually is. That argument runs hot to this day, and honestly, there's no clean answer. But at least Sub-Zero's identity crisis is just two brothers. Wait until you meet the ninja who's literally thousands of souls crammed into one body, Reptile. In 1992, you couldn't just pick Reptile from the character select screen. He didn't exist there. You had to earn him. Players needed to achieve a double flawless victory without blocking a single time and perform a fatality on the pit stage, while a silhouette flew across the moon. Miss any of those conditions? You'd never even know he was in the game. That's how Reptile became one of gaming's first secret unlockable characters. And honestly, one of its most mythologized. But here's the thing, that mysterious green ninja hiding in the code, he wasn't just a palette swap with a cool unlock condition. He was a flesh-eating alien. They just hadn't told you yet. Reptile's real name is Syzoth, and he belongs to an extraterrestrial reptilian species called the Saurians. Let that sink in. Every early appearance where he looked like a totally normal dude in a green suit, that was a shape-shifted alien consuming flesh to maintain his human form and regenerate damage. The retcon completely reframes his entire existence in the original trilogy. He wasn't a mysterious warrior. He was a monster, wearing a person, and his backstory only makes it worse. Sizoth is canonically the last of his kind, forced into servitude under Shao Kahn after his entire species was wiped out. He's not fighting for glory or revenge. He's fighting because he literally has no choice and no home to return to. What's wild is that Reptile has appeared in roughly 17 Mortal Kombat titles, yet fans consistently argue he's one of the most underutilized characters in the roster. A shape-shifting alien cannibal who's the sole survivor of a dead species, and he spends most games being someone's lackey. The premise is genuinely incredible. The execution rarely matches it, but Reptile's identity crisis is nothing compared to the next ninja, who doesn't even have a single identity to begin with. Smoke. Everyone talks about the robot ninjas. Sector and Cyrax get the spotlight, the story arcs, the dramatic betrayals. But the most interesting member of the Lin Kuei's cyber initiative isn't either of them. It's the one who said no. Tomas Verbata first showed up in Mortal Kombat 2 back in 1993 as a secret hidden fighter, one of those blink and you miss him encounters that drove arcade kids insane. He didn't become fully playable until Mortal Kombat 3, and then his own clan tried to erase him. The cyber initiative was exactly as horrifying as it sounds. A program designed to strip warriors of their free will, gut their humanity, and turn them into obedient robotic killing machines. Sector submitted willingly. Cyrax was converted against his will, but ultimately turned. Smoke? Smoke fought it. He's the only member of that program to successfully resist full conversion while keeping his soul and his agency intact. Let that sink in. His own people tried to turn him into a machine, and he chose to stay human when that choice nearly cost him everything. Here's where it gets interesting though. His signature abilities, the smoke teleportation, the smoke bombs, they exist in this weird space between supernatural power and cybernetic enhancement. The franchise has never fully explained whether his powers are mystical or technological, and honestly, that ambiguity is perfect. A character caught between human and machine shouldn't have clean, fully explained abilities. The mystery is the point. Smoke serves as the narrative bridge between the human Lin Kuei members and the robot ninja subfaction. He's the connective tissue that makes the whole cyborg storyline work. But despite having one of the most genuinely tragic backstories in the entire franchise, a man who nearly lost his humanity to the people who were supposed to be his family, he's been benched for huge stretches of the series and consistently overshadowed by the two guys who actually gave in. But at least Smoke kept his soul. The next ninja on this list lost everything, including his original identity, Noob Saibot. Here's something that shouldn't work. Two game developers, Ed Boon and John Tobias, wanted to sneak their names into Mortal Kombat 2, so they spelled them backward, slapped the result onto a hidden solid black palette swap of Sub-Zero, and called it a day. That's it. That's the origin of Noob Saibot, a developer in-joke. A goofy Easter egg buried in a 1993 arcade cabinet. And somehow, that joke became one of the most tragic characters in fighting game history. Because Noob Saibot isn't just a shadow with a funny name, he's Bihan, the original Sub-Zero. The guy you played as in Mortal Kombat 1. Scorpion killed him, Quan Chi resurrected him, and everything that made him human got stripped away in the process. No memories, no loyalty, no brother, just a dark, corrupted wraith wearing the corpse of someone who used to matter. Let that sink in. A cheeky naming gag became the franchise's most layered story about identity loss. That meta joke to canon pipeline is arguably the most bizarre character origin in all of fighting games, and nobody even questions it anymore because the lore landed so perfectly. His shadow clone abilities are almost poetic. He literally fights alongside a dark copy of himself because that's exactly what he is. A dark copy of the man Kuai Liang still mourns. He's appeared in over 16 games, and every single appearance reinforces the same question. Is Bihan still in there somewhere, or did the corruption destroy him completely? Fans have debated this for decades. Some believe Noob could be redeemed, maybe even reconciled with his brother. Others point to the evidence and say Bihan was always cold, always ruthless, and the Wraith just removed the mask. Canon hasn't resolved it. The corruption appears total, but if you think a man losing his identity is dark, wait until you hear about the character who never had one to begin with. Ermac. Here's a fun question. What happens when enough people believe in something that doesn't exist? Apparently, it becomes real. In the early 90s, gaming magazines started running stories about a hidden red ninja in the original Mortal Kombat. Players swore they'd seen him. They shared strategies for unlocking him. They argued about his move set in arcades across the country. There was just one small problem. He didn't exist. The name Ermac was traced back to an error macro debug entry buried in the arcade code. That's it. A diagnostic label. Not a character, not a secret, not a hidden fighter. A line of code that somebody misread and turned into a legend. But here's the thing. Players spread the myth so aggressively, so relentlessly, that the developers at Midway eventually just made him. Ermac finally showed up as a real playable fighter in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. They took a fan-created hoax and turned it into an official roster member. Ermac is Real went from being one of gaming's first mass arcade hoaxes to being one of gaming's first documented cases of fan fiction, becoming canon through sheer community pressure. The lie became the truth because enough people refused to let it die. And that origin story is funny. It's weird. It's uniquely Mortal Kombat. But then you actually look at what Ermac is in canon, and the humor drains pretty fast. Ermac is not one person. He is a fusion of thousands of warrior souls crammed into a single body. Every dead fighter, every fallen soldier, every extinguished consciousness, all compressed into one red-clad vessel. He's technically a crowd. He doesn't say I, he says we, and he means it. That raises questions nobody can answer. Is Ermac one entity with a unified will, or thousands of voices screaming over each other for control? Can you redeem a collective consciousness? Can something made of 1,000 fragmented identities even have a moral arc? The developers have left those questions deliberately open across 18+ games. And honestly, that might be the smartest thing they ever did with him. Some characters work better as unsolvable puzzles. But if Ermac's identity crisis sounds complicated, wait until you meet a ninja whose entire existence was a joke that got completely out of hand. Rain. Rain might be the most disrespected ninja in Mortal Kombat history. Not because he's weak, not because his design is bad, but because the developers gave him everything he needed to be a top-tier character, and then just forgot about him for 15 years. Let me explain. Rain first appeared in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 back in 1995, showing up in the arcade version's intro but not even playable until the console ports. A purple ninja outfit with hydrokinetic powers, water manipulation, lightning storms, the whole package. In a roster full of palette swaps, Purple actually stood out. He looked cool. He played cool. His elemental kit was unique enough to carve out real identity. And then NetherRealm essentially benched him for over a decade and a half. Here's where it gets weird. Rain kept showing up on rosters. He appeared in 17+ games across the franchise. But story focus? Zero. He was a ghost character hiding in plain sight. Playable, but narratively invisible. You could pick him, fight with him, and still have absolutely no idea who he actually was or what he wanted, and his lore only makes that worse. Rain is canonically Edenian, connected to the same realm as Kitana. Fans have speculated for years that he could be a hidden Edenian royal, possibly even Kitana's secret brother. The franchise has never definitively closed that door. They just left it cracked open and walked away. His backstory has gaps you could drive a truck through, with inconsistencies that shift depending on which timeline you're looking at. The frustrating part is that when later games finally gave Rain real story focus, it worked. The character clicked, which means the developers always knew he had untapped potential. They just repeatedly chose not to act on it. Some fans argue his water powers feel redundant alongside other elemental fighters, but honestly, that sounds like an excuse. Scorpion has fire, Sub-Zero has ice. Rain controls literal storms. That's not redundant. That's a trilogy. But if Rain's sidelining frustrates you, wait until you meet the ninja who spent 15 years trapped in the worst game Mortal Kombat ever made. Tremor. Let's be honest. Tremor's origin story is one of the most embarrassing in fighting game history. He debuted in Mortal Kombat Special Forces in 2000, a game so universally despised that it regularly fights for the title of worst Mortal Kombat game ever made. Not worst ninja, not worst character, worst entire game. That was Tremor's introduction to the world. A forgettable antagonist in a game everyone wanted to forget. And for 15 years, that was his entire legacy. He was a punchline. A trivia answer. Name a ninja from the worst MK game was basically his only claim to fame. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2015, Mortal Kombat X brought Tremor back from the dead, and not as some lazy callback. They completely redesigned him from the ground up with a full geokinetic moveset, built around earth manipulation, rock armor, seismic slams, lava-infused attacks, crystalline transformations. The guy went from who to one of the most mechanically satisfying DLC characters in the game. His earth powers made him the natural elemental counterpart to Rain's water and Scorpion's fire, rounding out this unspoken elemental ninja trio that fans had been theorizing about for years. Now, is he perfect? No. And this is the honest tension with Tremor. His personal lore is basically non-existent. His name is Tremor. His powers involve Earth. That's the biography. Compare that to characters with 30 years of betrayals, resurrections, and family drama, and Tremor reads like a blank page with cool particle effects. Fans are genuinely split on him. Supporters call his MKX Resurrection one of the best second-chance stories in fighting game history. Detractors argue he's a moveset without a soul, a character who looks incredible but says nothing. And newcomers? Most of them have zero idea he's even supposed to be on the ninja list. He earned his spot, but his seat is still warm and everyone knows it. Speaking of characters who had to fight for legitimacy, the next ninja on this list didn't just come from a bad game. She was literally manufactured to be someone else's replacement. Kitana. Kitana is over 10,000 years old. Let that satisfactorily sink in for a second. She has been fighting, killing, and surviving longer than most civilizations in the Mortal Kombat universe have existed. And yet somehow, the franchise keeps treating her like a side character in her own story. Here's the thing. Kitana debuted in MK2 back in 1993, and on the surface, she's a princess. Princess of Edenia, royalty, the whole deal. But that title is a manufactured cover. Shao Kahn conquered her realm, murdered her father, and raised her as his personal assassin. Her entire royal identity was a leash. She wasn't a princess playing warrior. She was a killer who didn't know she was a prisoner. And those fans she fights with, they look decorative. They look like accessories. That's the point. A 10,000-year-old assassin doesn't pick weapons that look threatening. She picks weapons that make you underestimate her right up until they cut through your throat. The design misdirection is actually brilliant when you think about it from a character perspective. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Kitana has more combat experience than virtually every other character on this list combined. 10,000 years of training, warfare, and assassination. She's been a hero, a queen, a reanimated villain, and everything in between across at least 3 major timeline versions and over 25 games. Her moral alignment shifts depending on which version you're looking at, but her power level never drops. And yet, the franchise has repeatedly positioned her as someone who needs saving, someone defined by her relationships to Liu Kang, to Shao Kahn, to whoever the current male lead happens to be. A warrior with literally millennia of experience getting sidelined into a love interest role. That's a genuine contradiction worth sitting with. Some fans argue she should be the franchise's true protagonist over Scorpion, and honestly, the resume supports it. The longevity, the power level, the narrative centrality. But the series has never fully committed to giving her that throne. Speaking of complicated women, the franchise doesn't quite know what to do with. Kitana's story gets even messier when you meet the person literally built to replace her, Mileena. Mileena wasn't born, she was manufactured. Someone in Shao Kahn's court looked at Princess Kitana and decided they needed a disposable copy. So they spliced Tarkatan DNA with Kitana's essence and created a living weapon. That's it. That's her entire reason for existing. She was built to be replaceable, and that's exactly why she became irreplaceable. Mileena debuted in Mortal Kombat 2 back in 1993, and on the surface, she looked like just another palette swap, another female ninja in a slightly different color. But underneath that veil was a mouth full of razor-sharp Tarkatan teeth, and a set of cannibalistic tendencies that made her one of the most viscerally disturbing characters the franchise has ever produced. She doesn't just kill people, she eats them. Here's where it gets complicated though, because Mileena isn't just a monster. She's a monster with the most legitimate grievance on the entire roster. She didn't ask to be created. She didn't choose to be a clone. She didn't consent to having predatory instincts hardwired into her biology. Everything about her existence was decided by someone else, and then she was expected to just be grateful for it. Some timelines give her a split between a mad persona and a sane one, meaning she may not even be fully in control of her worst impulses. She commits genocide, she commits cannibalism, but she also desperately seeks family, autonomy, and a sense of identity that was stolen from her before she ever took a breath. Depending on which timeline you're following, she's a tragic victim, an irredeemable villain, and a sympathetic anti-hero all at the same time, and the franchise has never resolved which one she actually is. That ambiguity is exactly why fans can't stop arguing about her. The debate over whether Mileena deserves redemption or is beyond saving has no clean answer, and it never will. She's appeared in over 24 games. Her fanbase is one of the most dedicated in the entire community. When she was left off Mortal Kombat 11's base roster, the backlash was so intense it became a whole thing. People weren't just disappointed, they were angry. That's the kind of loyalty a character earns when they're genuinely complex instead of just generically evil. Mileena is a tragedy wrapped in a horror movie wrapped in a fighting game. But she's not the only ninja on this list whose identity was shaped by forces beyond her control. Jade. Here's something most people don't think about with Jade. She's the only ninja on this entire list who has been both a completely good character and a completely evil character, and both versions were canonical. Not corrupted like Noob Saibot, where the original person is essentially dead. Not a collection of souls like Ermac, where identity is already fractured. Jade was a whole person who became her own opposite, and that distinction matters more than people give it credit for. She first appeared in Mortal Kombat 2 back in 1993 as a hidden non-playable character, a secret fight that most players never even found. But she didn't become fully playable until Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 in 1995, where she stepped out as an Edenian warrior, Kitana's childhood friend, green costume, staff weapon, loyal protector. That's the Jade most people picture. But here's the thing, that version of Jade wasn't even her starting point. Her earliest canonical loyalties were to Shao Kahn. The good Jade that everyone associates with the character was itself a development, a redemption that happened over multiple games. She wasn't born a hero, she chose it. And then the timeline ripped that choice away from her. In her brainwashed form under Kotal Kahn, Jade is functionally a different person operating inside the same body. Same fighting ability, same staff, same face. But zero agency, zero loyalty to the people she spent lifetimes protecting. She's an assassin with no memory of why she should care about Kitana, about Edenia, about any of it. That's the same identity destruction we talked about with Noob Saibot, but grounded in something far more human. Bihan died and came back as a wraith. Jade didn't die. She was just erased while still breathing. And honestly, a lot of fans think that version of her is more compelling. The brainwashed assassin timeline proved Jade could carry darkness, menace, and moral complexity without needing Kitana standing next to her to justify her existence. She's appeared in over 20 MK games. Her staff-based fighting style is consistently praised as one of the most technically distinctive among the female ninjas. But the fan argument that keeps coming back is simple. Stop defining Jade through her friendship with Kitana. Give her the solo arc about losing and reclaiming identity that her story has been begging for since the timeline split. She deserves to be more than a supporting chapter in someone else's narrative. But if Jade's identity crisis feels grounded and human, the next entry takes that concept and drowns it in blood. Literally. Scarlet. Every ninja on this list was either born into power, trained into it, or corrupted by it. Scarlet wasn't any of those things. She was built. At least, that's what the original story told us. In MK9, Shao Kahn took blood, actual blood, from fallen warriors and used hemomancy to construct a living weapon from scratch. Not recruited, not cloned, constructed. But MK11 rewrote her entirely. Suddenly, she was a street orphan, taken in by Shao Kahn and trained in blood magic. Two completely different origins. And the franchise just kept moving like that wasn't a big deal. And that contradiction matters more than you think. See, regardless of which origin you follow, Scarlet isn't just a fighter who uses blood magic. She is blood magic. Her abilities let her manipulate, weaponize, and absorb blood in ways no other ninja can replicate, which means she has a biological dependency that no other ninja shares. She has to consume blood to survive, not to get stronger, not to fuel some ultimate ability, to literally continue existing. Every fight Scarlet enters isn't about honor, revenge, identity, or loyalty. It's about staying alive for another day. She fights because if she stops, she dissolves. Think about what that means compared to everyone else on this list. Scorpion fights for vengeance. Kitana fights for her people. Mileena fights for an identity she was never given. Scarlet fights because the alternative is ceasing to exist entirely. That's not motivation, that's biology. And biology doesn't negotiate. Here's where it gets unsettling. Every opponent Scarlet defeats makes her stronger. Every drop of blood she absorbs adds to her mass, her power, her durability. She doesn't just win fights, she grows from them. That's not a game mechanic. That's the logic of an apex predator, and there's no ceiling on it. The more she kills, the more dangerous she becomes, indefinitely. She debuted as DLC in MK9 back in 2011, making her one of the youngest ninjas on this list by decades. She was completely absent from MKX, then returned as a base roster fighter in MK11 before vanishing again from MK1. The franchise can't decide whether to keep her or shelve her, and some fans see that inconsistency as a weakness. But here's the thing, the ninja you haven't figured out yet is the one you should be most worried about. Every legacy character on this list has already shown you their ceiling. Scarlet hasn't even started climbing. She's not the most iconic ninja in Mortal Kombat. She's not the most popular. But if you're ranking by pure cold biological threat, a creature fueled by blood that gets stronger every time it kills, with no known upper limit, that's not a ninja. That's an extinction event waiting to happen. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the best fighters in Mortal Kombat explained, click the video on the screen now.